Hello and welcome to Open Mic Wrestling Night here on Fill in a Void Podcast Network. Sorry for the delay if you all were looking to listen live at approximately 7 p.m. Technology was giving me a hard time, so I'm just going on a little bit later. This is July 28, 2018. Dave Kalypso here, as usual, as your host. If you wish to tweet at me, at Kalypso426, that is Kalypso 426. And you can also find me at Dave Kalypso on Facebook. So, if you all are looking at the title of this episode here, is this really an evolution? Well, if you've been following the world of wrestling for the last week, you will understand what this is in reference to. But before we get to that, let's just mention also that I'm going to be talking about Slammiversary, in which that happened last Sunday, and the new NXT Champion, and hopefully I'll get to SummerSlam up until this point. So, that's out of the way. Now, is this really an evolution? As many of you had seen this Monday on Raw, this past Monday on Raw, I should say, Stephanie McMahon, along with Vince McMahon and Triple H, made the announcement that there will be the first all-women's WWE pay-per-view, which will take place in October. It'll be held at the Nassau Coliseum on Long Island, New York. And while this is a huge deal on many a level, that it's a WWE pay-per-view, that it's the first all-women's pay-per-view, that we've come from the Divas Revolution to the Women's Evolution to now what this is currently. So, okay. Let me just point it out that I'm very happy that WWE is making a production all women's pay-per-view. It's long overdue. And if you're a fan of just strictly WWE, you're like, well, yeah, I mean, it is overdue. They've been doing so great with revolutionizing women's wrestling lately and this, that. Just stop right there. Just stop right there. Because if you're saying it that way, that WWE is responsible for it, they're responsible for giving a bigger platform, I guess, for all women to be included in certain things. Such as their own Hell in a Cell matches, their own Money in the Bank ladder matches, their own... the two women's champions, one for Raw and one for SmackDown. They changed to the women's championship from the Divas title, thankfully, back at WrestleMania 31. 31 or 32? 32, sorry. 32. And like I said, while this is great, this is far from the first time that anything like this has ever happened. Let me elaborate. Now, and I also threw it in there of an audience of this magnitude, the reach, the reach in which this is, going, and because Impact Wrestling is they had an all women's pay-per-view back in 2013. It was a one night only, and who was included in the card, I don't know offhand. I sincerely apologize. But yeah, Impact Wrestling one night only, Knockouts Knockdown, was in 2013. And yeah, it wasn't the first all women's production though, either. Now, Impact Wrestling has a larger audience than, I mean, it's hard to say, but in 2013, even with their company going down the way they were going down, they weren't the first all-women's collection in pro wrestling. And, even you even look at the old WWF days, right? The women's division then was hot too. You had women like Moolah, Shirley Martel, Wendy Richter. Then come Alundra Blaze, Leilani Kai, who was there even before that kind of came about. There was at one time a WWF and National Wrestling Alliance shared the World Women's Tag Team Championships from 1971 to 1988. The belts were retired in 1989. And, everything, it's like, for the casual fan, yeah, this is a big deal. Because they went from this wrestling to, back in the 80s, 70s, even beforehand, to the sex, drugs, rock and roll, the Attitude Era, where the women barely wrestled. They kind of phased those out and brought in women who, they weren't wrestlers. They were models who were just playing wrestler. It was like Glow. Not the current TV show on Netflix, but back in the day, yeah, a lot of these women were really good at what they do, but a lot of it was, it was a show that was made to be like wrestling. And even some of those women were really good. Look at Ivory. She went from there to WWF Women's Champion. Now, as significant as Glow was I a big fan? I'm going to say no just because I came into it late. I didn't grow up with it, and I found the production, everything else, as a lot of stuff in the 1980s, be very cheesy. So that's that. But you did have Glow, which was revolutionary in its own way, and again, some women from there went on to do something better and bigger. But if anybody thinks that this is like some new concept who just watched WWE, and even for the casual fan, no, it is far from it. Again, TNA had it in 2013, and even before that, there have been other all-women companies. Yeah, all-women wrestling companies, such as, the first one that I remember, Shimmer, Shine, and what was closer to me, WSU, which it's still kind of running, Women's Wrestling Uncensored, which I remember they had a lot of great talent there too, and they had women like Mercedes Martinez, who was the longest reigning, I believe she is still, she holds that title, that record. If not, it was Jessica Havoc, but she at one point was the longest reigning WSU champion. She had a great feud with Angel Orsini back, when WSU was what it was. I think they both wrestled for 75 minutes in a match. It was an Iron Woman match, and then it went on for overtime, which then was like a 75-minute match. It was either that or it was a 2 out of 3 that went just really a long time. Not a match that I personally watched. I just remember people who were there and said it was such a big deal. And it was great, and I take their word for it. Then let's see, Pro Wrestling Eve's another company, and Stardom, which is in Japan. So, is this really an evolution? Well, yes and no. Yes, because now the WWE has caught up to what's been going on in the world of wrestling for all of this time, between all the women's companies, and those are the main ones, but then there's other ones that are out there. Women of Warriors is another one that I could think of, and there's plenty of others. There's plenty of all-women shows, intergender shows, which intergender wrestling is becoming a bigger thing now on the independents. Is this an evolution for the WWE fan? Yes. It's a far cry from the Divas revolution, or give Divas a chance stuff, and even before, when they were going on there, having women on for 30-second matches, and then you have the one real wrestler in Beth Phoenix amongst all these models, which was a crock of shit and a joke. But, geez, could you imagine now an all-women's pay-per-view with the models that they would have on for so long? That would be a snooze fest. It'd be a perpetual pay-per-view. Impact Wrestling would have more buys than that pay-per-view, if that were back in those days. Now, with the women's wrestling that they're highlighting today, they already announced that there's going to be an NXT women's title match, NXT women's title match, Raw and SmackDown women's title matches, the Mae Young Classic finals at this event. And that's great, but now here are the other questions. How long is this event going to be? Is it going to be a 3-hour show? Or is it going to be a full-fledged 4-hour show? Is there going to be any way that they're going to sneak men into this? Mixed tag matches, maybe. Like, let's say, Rusev and Lana versus Michelle McCool and The Undertaker. Just to throw it out there. Because, okay, these women are great and all, but they need a little extra push to have a draw for the network.